Hello, friend, and welcome to episode number 17 of the VIP Collective. Hello.
Hi.
We're rolling.
Okay.
It's on. It's
Okay.
time.
I'm ready.
Very excited to have you
Thank you for having me.
on the Collective. So, for everyone who is watching and or listening, we are with Ashley Lindzon from Lindzon Events. And Ashley, give us a breakdown. How did it start?
Well, it got started about 8 years ago. It started in and around the time that I started becoming more aware of Pinterest and, Style Me Pretty, wedding blogs, etc. I was not yet engaged, but I was kind of entering the scene with all of my girlfriends. One of my good friends and I started writing a blog. So we thought it would be interesting to kind of put information out there about what to wear to a bridal shower, or what gift to bring to a wedding, where to find cute bridesmaids gifts, knowing the right protocol, etiquette, etc. with regards to weddings. It was very current for us in the stage that we were at. We were going to a lot of weddings. We were bridesmaids for each other. And it was also a change in market in the time that all these blogs were becoming more popular. There was a lot more media to follow. Whereas I think traditionally before that, it was, magazine clippings and kind of cutouts. Whereas now, you could be surfing online and get everything at your fingertips. So right. We both had full-time jobs. Sorry to my past employer. But I would admit that I spent 90% of my time at that job, surfing online, following different blogs. I was beyond obsessed with Style Me Pretty. And so that kind of led to the discussion and conversation with other people. We did not have a big following at all, but the following that we had was really paying attention. And I found that every time we put out an article, we were getting a lot of response rate, and we were getting a lot of impressions, and people clearly were looking for more detail and information. And, we were not doing anything that wasn't out there, but I think we were doing it to target a market within our group of friends and our communities, etc. And from there, I got engaged, she got engaged, and then we were really in the thick of it. So we were talking about all things wedding all the time, whether on the blog or off the blog. And I knew at the time that I was not destined to be at this office job that I was at, but I didn't know what that looked like. So because I was now engaged, I ended up, interviewing with every wedding vendor there was. I went to every wedding show, and I just really fell in love with the entire industry, etc.
Pre-business?
Pre-business,
okay.
Yeah. Definitely not in the business.
Yep.
Just as a regular bride, kind of getting all the information. Mm-hmm. And I would actually approach other planners and photographers, and we would write about their weddings on our blog, and really just had a fascination for it. At one point, I met with a store to become their stylist for their windows, and it wasn't the right fit. So kind of understanding what was out there. I interviewed a lot of people more because I was trying to put together a team for my wedding. But as I kind of entered in that process, I realized that maybe there was room for somebody like me within the industry. So fast forward a little bit of time, I'm engaged. I'm looking to enlist the services of a wedding planner, and I had an amazing wedding planner. However, I found that everybody that I met with at first was more targeted towards my mom. So my parents don't live in Toronto. I'm from Ottawa originally, and the first question that I would always get asked was about my parents' involvement and where my mom was at the meeting. And, it just seemed off to me that it was my wedding, and we were in a time where I think the shift had already happened, where brides were more in control. And whether it be because we had so much more information at our fingertips, and, I think that the idea of your mom planning your wedding was just more outdated at the time. Mm-hmm. And this is no disrespect to the moms or those planners. It was more just, I thought that there was the need for something more current, for somebody that could appeal to the brides and also to the moms, but kind of more of a middle ground. And I just realized that I had a love for the process. So again, I didn't know before my wedding that I would end up being a wedding planner. But kind of shortly after that, I had a few friends getting married, and they wanted, me to style a suite table, or for me to help with some ideas, etc. And I did that in exchange for getting photos and kind of using it as my work.
Right.
And about a year later, I got my first wedding on Style Me Pretty and kind of blogged about it, started an Instagram account about it. And then shortly after, the rest kind of started to unfold. So
wow. What was the office job before?
It was for a company that develops retirement homes.
Oh, wow.
So nothing to do with anything that I was
Property
doing.
development.
Correct.
And then you were doing wedding development on the
Correct.
side.
Yeah. Yeah. On the side is a loose term. 3 years in, my boss found my website and clients, and yeah. So I had a full-time job for the first 3 years, but I'd say the first 2 years it was really about figuring out what I wanted out of it. And with anything else, the average engagement planning time is typically about a year. So even from the time that I put my name out that I was doing this to the time that I started actually putting weddings together, it took a bit of time to come together.
The fun fact that everybody should know is that you were married in 2013?
2012. February 2012, yep.
February 2012.
Yep.
And the company that I was working for at the time, Cloud9 Creative, filmed your wedding.
That is correct.
So we actually met a very long time ago.
Yeah, literally my first intro into the whole industry was my wedding. And
Yeah.
Bruce, the owner of Cloud9, was actually very influential in the sense that, he brought me, he was the one that first told me about the Wedlock show. And he had helped, I booked him early on because I loved all of your films and the work that he and you were doing. Mm-hmm. And he was one of the people that I turned to ask for advice on vendors and building the right team. So yeah, it was a great experience. Yeah.
So you were able to book your vendors and then ask your vendors for advice on how to kind of get into the industry at that point.
Less about getting into the industry, more about building my vendors for the wedding day itself.
Right.
Because at the time, I didn't really know if I was entering the industry or how, when, etc. And I didn't imagine at the time that I would enter it and now be in the place that I'm in today.
So did you think that did your blog hold a lot of weight? You said people were actually kind of reading, because blogs were big in that era.
Blogs were big. It didn't actually carry any weight in a business sense. It carried weight in the fact that I think that it resonated with people. So I think it was a different angle of talking about weddings, and I think that it was a new perspective, and more than anything, it was an outlet for myself and my friend at the time, who's not in the wedding industry, but it was an outlet, and I think that it really got a fire started within me. That's really what I think it did, and I think my wedding did that as well. I loved planning my wedding. I enjoyed every part of it. I loved the experience and the day. And I think it all just kind of sparked a fire. At the time, I didn't know that it would be in planning. Mm-hmm. And every time I see the planner that I used, I kind of, sheepishly at the beginning was like, oh, I hope you're okay that I'm entering the industry. Because, there's that sense of, I don't want it to come from a competitive place. It was very organic how it started. And, my first two clients are actually good friends of mine. One was getting married. And I say client loosely because it was more, I want to do your wedding because selfishly I needed business. Mm-hmm. But she was getting married purely for legal purposes. So she married somebody from Argentina. She needed to get married for his visa purposes. Mm-hmm. And if it was up to her, she would have gone to City Hall. And I kind of pushed her to do a little bit more than that, and pushed her for a candy bar and string lights and place cards and goodie bags and all things that were more what today would be considered, I guess, an Instagrammable moment.
Right.
But at the time was more to get featured on a blog and to kind of put weight under my name.
Are you still writing blogs now?
No.
Stopped. Are you still writing?
No.
Do you do any journaling or anything like that?
I do some journaling. So I've always said that one day I hope to write a book about all of this. I think that, it would have to be once I'm done all of this, because I think some of the stories are too good not to share.
Definitely.
But I think that they'd have to be anonymous. Mm-hmm. And hopefully one day. Unfortunately, it's just not something that I have time for right now. And I think that blog, where I think it changed to is I think the blog turned into what Instagram is now. Instead of, a full post, it then turned into a Facebook album and then turned into an Instagram post. I think that's just kind of the social media evolvement that has happened over the last 8 years.
Is that where you find that you're getting a lot of your inquiries are through both of those? Because I saw that on your site, you direct people to that.
Correct.
So do you practice more of the artsy part on Instagram, Facebook, and then it's, if you're going to come and see me, come to these places to see the work?
Yeah, so I changed that 2 years ago. So I used to have a full website. It used to have a lot more information. It used to have full weddings. It used to have more information. I mean, the artsy part is a hard thing when you're a wedding planner, because your art is actually more in the scheduling and logistics and the non-pictured side of things. And what I'm putting out there as the artsy side is actually other people's work. So it's kind of a gray area, but I think that's with everybody. What's in somebody's photos is also what the florist did, or the hair and makeup team, or the bride itself, and the dress. So it's really a collaborative side of things. So the artsy side, I try not to take too much ownership in. I just try and share beautiful images from beautiful days. In terms of sending people to my website or my social media, I think that Instagram is definitely my most popular like marketing tool. I think I get the most calls or emails from there. That being said, I would say referral business is still my number one word of mouth tool. I'd say 7 out of 10 clients come from word of mouth referrals. I've been lucky enough that, you know, when I kind of started really taking speed in the industry, I think it was, you know, I had 1 or 2 clients and then their bridesmaids all booked me. So that's kind of how it evolved. So I would do 1 wedding and then, you know, 3 bridesmaids were engaged and they would all call me right after, which has been really helpful. And then the same with families. Like I've had quite a few families where I did 1 wedding and now I'm doing their 3rd child's wedding, which has been amazing.
So you're a part of the family.
Yeah. I've done a few hat tricks. It's really special to be a part of. I have 1 coming up this year and they thought they were my first. So I was sad to disappoint them that they weren't. But
your first hat trick?
Yeah. Because it's really special. I mean, it becomes, you become a part of the family and you become integrated into their process, but it also makes the process easier in the sense that I know what dynamics I'm dealing with. So yeah, I would say word of mouth is by far my number one. I maintain an Instagram page because I think that that's our best marketing tool today. And I think that, you know, if somebody hears about me through somebody else, the first thing that I do when somebody tells me about anybody is check them out on Instagram. Facebook, I think, is kind of phasing out on our side of things, more just because I don't use it very often. And I only have time to manage so much. And yeah.
And so if someone asks you for a business card, do you just say, here's Instagram? Or
often, yes. I do have business cards. They're from many, many years ago. I printed a million of them because, you know, I was hopeful that I would be in this place. When they run out, I'll probably print more, but I would say it doesn't have my Instagram handle on it, and it should, because I do think that that's just the easiest way of getting to somebody. I find a lot of the emails, like I track where emails come from, and often it's through Instagram over my website. And often it's on a mobile, so I think that that's where things have changed too. Like people aren't looking at people on a computer the same way. And then I've started also, I think I get a lot of referrals from vendors as well. So I think that there's a big part of our wedding community that supports each other. And, you know, it depends on where clients are in the process, but sometimes the venue is the first item selected. Sometimes the photographer is, sometimes I am. And I think it just depends on where they are in their search. But sometimes that ends up being a trickle effect as well.
Right. And so you do a lot of Jewish weddings? I do. Is it primarily Jewish weddings, or what's kind of your percentage of?
I would say I'm probably 75% Jewish weddings. That was not by design by any means. And actually my first 2 years, I don't even think I did any Jewish weddings. I am Jewish myself. So I think that just being in the community and having some connections within that helps. But I think that the beautiful thing about the Jewish community, and the thing that I'm most proud of, is I think the support for each other is quite strong. So I think that going back to that kind of referral and word of mouth, when you have a good dynamic and a good rapport and a good reputation, I think that that travels quickly within the community. And I think that's the same with a lot of cultures. It's just that that's kind of been the one that has been a consistent support of my business. This year we're doing a few more non-Jewish weddings, but I'd say definitely still 75%.
Well, Jewish weddings are so fun.
Yes, they are. They are, definitely.
The Hora is...
It's a party.
The Hora is super aggressive sometimes. What is one of the best ones you think you've seen?
Oof.
There's so many, but there's so many different things that happen. Like sometimes there's a sheet that comes out and they toss people around. Sometimes there's a table. Sometimes there's inflatable.
There's all sorts of
toys. Like what's the
So we've seen it all. I would say Horas are definitely the item that we try and bring the groom into the conversation in, because it's definitely like, it's a very heavy focus. Let's get the party started. I feel like when the grooms aren't involved, I know I can always loop them in the Hora conversation, because we know that that's going to be a big groom party moment. Table is definitely one that I recommend, because I think it's a lot safer than the sheet. I think the sheet is a little scary, just because you never know where you're going to land. That being said, my husband did the sheet 8 years ago, and some of our best photos and moments of the video are him flying on the sheet. The not so great parts of it is that he broke somebody's glasses as he was landing down from the sheet. And we have the best picture of him landing with somebody's glasses like this, with the broken glass, his foot in the air.
Get the party
started. I think you have to be confident. Yeah. I did a wedding a couple years ago. Amazing wedding, amazing party, amazing hora. But the hora often happens at the very beginning of the night. So my only caveat to the brides is to be aware of the fact that it's 7:30 in the evening, sometimes 8 o'clock, 7:45, but it's early. So your guests have only seen you walk down the aisle, and probably that's it. And then you're entered into this giant mosh pit hora.
Right.
And this wedding a couple years ago, bride, super fun, super cool, went to crowd surf and her whole dress ripped at the top.
Oh, wow.
So that's the only issue, is you're talking early in the night.
Was it salvageable?
Yes, totally salvageable.
Okay.
I think it was one of my scariest moments also, but I basically went over to her with a pair of scissors and I was like, trust me. And I cut it. It was all mesh at the top and one side had ripped. So I was like, do you trust me? And she was like, I do. And I cut it to match it on the other side. And it looked great. And thank God.
So now you're a dress designer.
No, but thank God it worked out. But that's the risk of the hora, is that, for a man, it's a little bit easier. For the brides, they're in these perfectly tailored, perfectly fitting gowns. And in the bridal dress store, you kind of bounce around and you're like, yeah, I'm good. You never go crowd surfing and know how that's going to work. Half the brides don't even lift their arms to feel how that's going to feel.
That should be a trial.
I totally agree. I think people try and sit, but you need to know that you can hora more than anything.
Yeah.
I think the table's a lot of fun. I'd say that props have become more of a thing also in terms of, whether it's pool inflatables or confetti or balloons, balls, etc.
Right.
Because I think that the hora has become the item that sets the tone for the party.
Right.
People really feel that a good hora sets the tone for a good night. And I think it's also, like anything in our world, everything's about going bigger and bigger and bolder. So I think the hora is another example of that. Everybody wants to outdo the last person's hora, but there's only so crazy you can get.
True.
Yeah.
What about the chuppahs? So chuppahs are super interesting to me. They're beautiful. And they obviously have a religious aspect to them. But how do you decide when you're with a client? How do you decide what the chuppah is going to look like? Is that you? Is that florist? Is it how does
it's a combination? I'd say with a lot of the design elements, it's a combination. So some brides, especially in today's world of Pinterest and Instagram, etc., some brides come to the table knowing what it looks like.
Okay.
Some come to the table with knowing what their room is going to look like, and then we kind of develop the ceremony, cocktail, etc., everything else to coordinate or to complement at least. Otherwise, I think it's a personal evolution and decision. So, budget plays a big role in those discussions. Some people, the ceremony is a strong priority. Some people it isn't. Floral, not floral. I think that metal and acrylic has had a big moment lately, whereas when we were getting married, everybody was using a draped chuppah, and it was a lot less about the structure. I think with anything design based in weddings, now it's about how you can do something different. And a chuppah is 4 poles and a roof, no matter how you design it. So I think the uniqueness is getting hard. So it's really about how you accentuate it. I think it's also about the setting that you're in as well and complementing that. But at the end of the day, I think the most important part about the chuppah is that that's where you're getting married. So design, florals, over the topness aside, I think that should be the moment that is most cherished in a wedding day.
It does really feel intimate because being in photo and video, you have to be,
you're right under there.
You have to be closer.
Yeah.
And so there's a quietness and there's such a stillness with a lot of the
so
Jewish
beautiful.
weddings or just weddings in general, but there's just such a stillness and when you're under the chuppah, they're really having their moment together with the family, which is a really neat kind of
Well, it kind of separates them from the rest of the guests. A lot of the weddings that I do are 250 plus people. So we're talking about a lot of people in a room. And, a chuppah, whether it's an altar or a chuppah in a church or in a venue or a synagogue, wherever it is, altar or chuppah, I should say, I think that's the moment where you are taken away from your guests and you are brought into a different moment. And it is about the two of you and your families and, really feeling engaged in that moment.
For sure.
And if it can look beautiful, even better.
Why not, right? So how many weddings are you doing a year? What's kind of your...
I'm kind of trying to average 20 to 25 a year. So we've established the rule of once we hit 3 weddings in a month, we take off the last weekend. I want my team and my support staff to have a weekend off. I also have a child and a husband and like to spend some time off. We also are doing a lot of weddings for out-of-town clients.
Mm-hmm.
So I find in quieter times, it's helpful to have a weekend off to be able to book meetings, tastings, et cetera, or even in quieter times, having some time to do venue visits and initial tours and meetings with clients. We have a lot of clients that work Monday to Friday, obviously. So if we're working every weekend, then it's hard to schedule that in.
The hours for planners must be a little bit, for lack of a better term, whack.
Yeah, they're totally kooky.
Because, I mean, a lot of times your couples are going to be working their full-time jobs, and then they're going to want to do their planning in the evenings, and they're going to be connecting with you.
Correct.
Right? So do you set boundaries with clients, or is it kind of, I can get to you as soon as I can?
I'm not great at boundaries, but I also, that was kind of one of my items that I was pretty strong about when I started my business. So when I was on the hunt for a wedding planner and other vendors as well, I found that a lot of the criteria was quite rigid. I was at a 9-to-5 job, and even outside of the wedding planner, like the tastings had to be from 12 to 2. And it meant my parents had to take off 2 days of work. My husband and I had to take off a day of work because my parents live out of town.
Right.
And everybody was taking off time to go to a food tasting, which then became a stressful point, not an exciting point, whereas it should be more of a nice part of the wedding planning process.
You're going to eat food.
Yeah, exactly. So it was stressful. So I try and be really mindful of that. I'd say it has to be within reason because there's only so many hours in the day and it has to make sense. But I do work Monday to Thursday evenings just to accommodate schedule.
So tell me about the team. So you have a team you work with on the day of?
So I have a team that I work with on the day of, and then I have some extra support kind of behind the scenes to help with bookings, administrative.
How'd you find these gals or gentlemen?
Through the wedding industry primarily, through other vendors or through other trades, mostly freelance people that are looking to be in the industry. Some that were with other planners, some that still work with other planners. So,
do people reach out like from school and say, I'm studying right now? Do you have positions? Like, do you?
Yeah. So I try and take on an intern every summer, and that's usually from school-based.
Do they work
applicants.
out? Do you feel?
Sometimes.
Yeah?
Sometimes, yeah. Depends on the year. Depends on the people. The hard thing with, I think, working with a team that is event-based is that it's not a Monday to Friday job. So I think, often when they come from school, they're also looking for something that's a certain amount of hours.
Right.
Or if they're trying to do like a co-op through school. So I can't guarantee them a certain amount of hours from, April to August, especially if we're taking 3 weddings a month. Like it's actually, and it's 12 hours those days. It's not that much time. It's not a full-time job. So if it's experience-based, I think it does work out. Some of my started as interns are now still employees 4 years later. But some have now moved on to be in the hospitality world full-time and then freelance on site, which is actually a really good combination because then they have a Monday to Friday job. They're not relying on me to employ them full-time, but they can still dip their hands in and be involved on site.
Do you think school, like you obviously did this without schooling. I've done what I'm doing without schooling.
Right.
But if someone comes to you with school background as opposed to a bit of experience, are you likely to choose more of experience over back? Or is it just based on?
I don't know that one would sway me one way or the other. I think that it's personality. I think that it's fitting in with our team. So we've had people that come and want to, help out with an event, and we give it a try, and we just realize it wasn't a good fit for us. I think it's also, I've built a good relationship and reputation with a lot of the other vendors and venues and wait staff and caterers and, photo, videographer, et cetera. The people that I then have on my team need to represent that as well. And sometimes those aren't things that you can necessarily pinpoint or teach early on, but I think do make a big difference in the long run. So I think that that's where I like to just say, okay, come for a date, and then we come for a date as in try a wedding.
So you're dating your interns.
Yeah, no. I mean, try a date, see if it works, and then let's reevaluate from there. And a lot of it is, trial and error, but it's also seeing what works for them, what works for us. And a lot of people also assume when they want to come an intern and try a wedding and see how they fit into our team, they see what they see on Instagram, and it doesn't look like a lot of hard work. It looks like a lot of pretty flowers and cupcakes and bouquets and chuppahs and aisles and all of these beautiful things. And then they come and it's actually, cleaning underneath a table or placing 600 place cards or, steaming a dress or, worrying about something that hasn't arrived on time. So I'd say that the on-site stuff is way less frills and fun as it looks. That does not faze me nor my team, do I think. But, you're also dealing with a lot of emotions and high stress people. And yeah, I think it's about trial and error.
What do you do day of, month of, I
just do full planning.
You do full. So full can be up to 2 years or no?
Yeah. I usually don't get bookings 2 years out, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'd say it's usually a year and a half to 8 months is usually our typical booking time. When I first started, I did day of, partial, and full, and I made that change a couple of years ago just because I found that people had a misunderstanding of what that then meant, and I think that they were expecting full to be done in a 3-month period or full to be done in a 6-week period, and it was either a misrepresentation to them or it was almost, it was a disappointment on both ends because I would come to the table, say for partial 3 or 4 months out, and nothing would have been done. And then I had to do a year's worth of work in 3 months. And that's when mistakes get made. That's when things aren't available. And I think that their expectation was that what they were seeing online or what they had seen at their friends' weddings would then magically appear because they had hired me 3 months out when, that takes longer to build. And it just wasn't necessarily good for my brand or good for business.
I think that makes sense because unless, if you're a new bride and this is your first experience doing this, you're not going to know necessarily the difference between the packages. And so if you hire a planner, you're just going to expect that they're going to be able to do this. And yet that is not. So you've completely eliminated those.
I've completely eliminated it. Last year somebody came to me who was having a smaller scale wedding at a restaurant in the winter, didn't need full help, and could we make this work, and she was friends with one of my past clients. So in that case, I was like, okay, let's make this work on a case to case basis. But overall, I would say generally speaking, full planning is
especially because there are 250 people, so you're not dealing with small little
and there's a ton of vendors involved, and there's a lot of layers to weddings that I think, and it's hard, and I recognize that it's hard for clients to understand because it is their first time, like you said. And I think that there's a really big misunderstanding. I think when you contact a videographer or a cake person or a venue, you get a quote based on, 12 hours of coverage or a 4-tier cake or this kind of menu package. It's very tangible. You can understand what the price gets you. I think with planning, you're quoting on a service. So you're saying, you book me and magic happens, or I make your life easier, or you can put your trust in me, but it's not as tangible as a lot of the other services. So I think it's hard for people to quantify, and I get that because I think that unless you've seen it firsthand, which seeing it on the wedding day helps, but that's not necessarily seeing what the year process looks like, or what 6 months look like, etc. And you don't necessarily know the emotional side of things of how much you will rely on this person, or maybe you won't, or how much they'll help you understand your contract. There's different things that I think are hard to understand from the beginning, but I do feel that the more we can get in from the beginning, the better end result there is.
Which is why you opted to do that. Yeah. Makes sense. Plus you start to know the personalities of all of the families that you're working with, which is nice.
Yes, it's really important to us. We actually encourage everybody to join us as often as possible at different meetings, because it is important to know all the different players and to know the dynamics, because the more prepared we can be, the more successful the day is.
So I had somebody ask this from one of our viewers, wants to know what is kind of an app right now that is working with that planners are using either to organize, if any, or any systems that you're using. Anything?
So we have our own system. So I've created a checklist and operating kind of planning process. It's not through an app. I'm sure I could look into that further. I started using a few apps a couple of years ago. I just found that there was too many things that I had to do outside of it. So currently the way that we operate is we have a Google Sheet and shared folder for every client, and we have different tabs that kind of categorize. So the timeline, checklist, kind of breakdown, etc. And that's what we're using currently. So it's not an app, but it's kind of evolving checklist that we're currently updating as things change. And
did you develop your own system?
I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're on it. I know you're on it. I've seen you in action. You get your shit down.
Yeah, I get shit done for sure.
So,
but that's the whole point of it. And I think that's where, and everybody's different. Like I have some clients that have never asked to see that checklist because they just know that's why I've hired you and that's that. Mm-hmm. And other clients that want to watch every single time that something's checked off that list. And there's no right or wrong. Mm-hmm. I think that the only thing that I think to that point is that some of that is hard to quantify on paper. And I think the biggest struggle for people, especially at the beginning, and I struggle with it too, is kind of building that trust. Like I think once we get to the wedding day, they know what role I've taken. They know how much has gone into it. They know that everything's going to be great. I find the first 2 months can be hard for the bride or the client in general, because I think that you're waiting for this aha moment for everything to fall into place, and it doesn't always happen that quickly. You might not know right away what color flowers you want, and I might not answer that on day one, or I might not come up with the cute detail that you saw at your friend's wedding on day one, because it takes time. It takes time to develop. And I think if it happened overnight, you wouldn't necessarily be hiring professionals for that, because it's like designing a house. You don't choose one picture and then go with it and never make a change throughout the process. Mm-hmm. But I think at the beginning, when you're still creating a relationship and building a support and a trust, sometimes you want things to happen faster than they do. So I would just say, trust your team and trust that you've invested in the right people, and let that evolve a little bit organically as well.
So if I'm a bride and I'm coming to meet with you for the first time, what does that look like? And I'm not a referral, so I am a ginger you have never seen before. Right. How do I know to trust you? What kind of questions should I be asking to know?
That's a very good question. I would say, first time you would likely email me. So that's usually the way that the process goes. I would get an email. Typically, I suggest that we hop on a call first, mainly because it's a big city and I was meeting with everybody always, and I wasn't sending information over first, and that can be very time consuming and not worth it for the client either. Like, it's not just about my perspective, that's also about the client's perspective, especially if they're trying to meet with 6 different planners. That takes time, and most people aren't looking to spend that kind of time. So currently, the way that our process works is you email us, we send you over information, pricing, packaging, etc., details, and then we set up a call. I like to make sure that by phone we both feel that it's a good fit, because if they don't feel it's a good fit, or if I don't feel it's a good fit, which is not usually the case, then I think it's easy to figure that out. The next step would be meeting. Some of my brides after that phone call, brides or mothers or whoever, decide right away we're moving forward, and that's that. So then we start and we meet at the venues first. Other clients come to me, they already know what their venue is, so then we might meet at a coffee shop or a house and kind of get the ball rolling. And that first meeting is kind of developing that timeline. So the checklist and timeline that I have created, I adjust at that first meeting to kind of tailor towards everybody's planning process. If that's not the case and it's more of an interview, typically we meet at a coffee shop or somewhere that's convenient to the client. I operate out of a home office, so I don't have an office that I use for meetings. And we go through the process. So I'd say in terms of questions to ask, I would ask,
because ours is so tangible that it's
that's why it's hard.
That's why it's so hard, and I'm curious to know, would I say let me see some of your timelines, or how do you when are you available?
I do get asked. I get asked a lot about what my meeting hours are, so I think that is a key thing. So I'm very transparent about the fact that I don't restrict my time at all. I get asked a lot, and I actually do think that this is an important question, and this is something that I learned through the business. I get asked a lot about how many weddings we take on at a time, and I think it's important. We very rarely take on more than one event in a weekend. The only times that we do are on extreme situations, or if one of my colleagues takes one on for different circumstances, but I'd say that happens 2 or 3 times a year at most. So that we get asked a lot. We get asked about how the process works, so understanding what the initial stages are. So we walk through that. The initial stage is creating this timeline. It's also creating a budget, about making recommendations, how we choose our vendors. So we're very clear about, we make recommendations based on our experience and, trust in other teams, but we're not exclusive to working with people. So I do feel that clients should have the ability to choose their own teams. I will always be transparent if I don't know about these people, because I think it's important to have trust in them and to know the team that you're building. But if your best friend's cousin used some photographer that I've never heard of, I'm never going to say that doesn't work for me, and like I won't be your planner because they're your photographer.
Right.
But I'm also happy to make a recommendation for a photographer that I know will kill it and develop the photos or deliver the photos that you'd want to see.
That's kind of the nice thing, is you get to build a team that you know and trust.
Totally.
And then you know that the day's going to go off without any issues, because these are people you know. So.
Right. Which is kind of going back to the idea of like when I used to get more same day planning inquiries, or when I used to do more of them, you know, we were kind of entering into teams that we didn't know a lot about, and sometimes that didn't work to our benefit. And we weren't able to properly develop relationships with people because it was only 4 or 5 weeks out. So I think just in general, it just wasn't indicative of our level of service or our brand, etc.
Fact.
Fact. Yeah, fact.
Good answers.
For sure.
Those are good questions. Because I'm curious. I'm not a bride.
Right.
But I'm always like, what's a key question? Because
yeah, and I think that you would know the key questions. Like I think that, you know, a lot of it, we get asked a lot about like how the design process works, how much we're involved in, how much the decorator's involved in, the florist, etc. And I think, again, a lot of that, it's less tangible because every situation is different. Like I have one wedding that a lot of people have asked about, and like the mother ended up steering a lot of the design. And like I'm very transparent about that. I think that we worked together as a team and we developed it together, but she drove a lot of that. And I loved her design taste. And, you know, there's no wedding that I would say is solely on one person. Like I'd say, you know, some clients come to the board with a lot more drive and design focus than others. You don't need to have that design focus because that might not be your strength. But if you do, you know, bring that to the table. And sometimes that ends up being an amazing collaboration as well. And then others really just want to rely on their teams, which also ends up being a strong suit. It's just every situation is different. But I feel like the important message is to trust your people, because I'm finding in today's world of having so much information and seeing everything every Monday morning after a weekend of weddings, it's making people so non-confident in their choices. And I think that's a society issue more than anything.
People will see things and be like, oh, maybe I should do something different.
Why
and
didn't you recommend this to me?
Why
Why'd you do it for this weekend? Did you see what so-and-so did this weekend?
But you know that maybe that flavor isn't for that personality. Correct. She just saw a pretty photo.
Not in their budget.
Or it's not in their budget.
And I think that's okay. It's just that it's a hard world. And I think it's a hard world for everybody to be living in right now, because I think there's so much information everywhere and everybody wants everything. But I think especially when it comes to, I think that you need to be confident, and I think you need to see the end goal, which is not about the wedding. It's about the marriage and the relationship and sharing with all of your people, because I think that that's the most important thing. As much as I love pretty things and extravagant weddings and luxury and all of the things, I think that can take over a lot of it.
What do you think was you're completely happy with your wedding? Did you have any regrets of anything you missed, or you kind of had everything that you wanted?
No, I had everything I wanted, because I think at the end of the day, like when I look at my wedding pictures, would I choose the same flowers, linens, etc. today? No. But I'm so happy that wasn't my only focus. My focus was on the weekend and celebrating with people, and it truly, I think, was carried through. The focus was also on, we're both big family people. I come from a big family and a very, very close family, and that had such a big significance in our wedding weekend. And I think, you know, my biggest thing, I think personally and professionally, I care strongly about the guest experience. So I do care, obviously, what it looks like, and those are the only things that you can really convey on social media, so I think that's what people see. But I care much more about the flow of event and the guest experience, the service level, etc. Because I think at the end of the day, that's what really stands out to people. I think that being in a room where you can really feel love and support and a strong family and, you know, real support of this couple and that kind of energy, you know, all the flowers in the world can't bring that to life. So I really do believe that energy and love and a feeling of that mixed with good service and a great guest experience and a good flowing event, I think that takes over everything. And I think that's the part that I can't explain with the description or with, notes in what our service is, but I really do feel that those priorities shine through. And if budget allows or the venue allows or whatever the case may be for it to also be extravagantly beautiful, then it's a win-win for everybody. But I do feel that, a message that I often hear is that, yeah, it was beautiful, but we didn't eat dinner till 11, or it was beautiful, but it wasn't very fun. So I think that people notice those things. Like you can spend all your money on flowers and decor. I think that at the end of the day, if you wait too long for a drink at the bar, or the order of events don't make sense to you, or the guest experience was frustrating, I think that that's your takeaway. So I really do put a strong emphasis on planning a proper timeline, making sense of it, and I think personalizing it. I think that the biggest thing is also that people walk away and it wasn't just a great wedding by X, Y, and Z vendors. I think it should feel like it was Joe and Jane's wedding more than anything. And I think that the guests should walk away, whether it's, that they recited their own vows and it made you laugh in your belly during the ceremony, or, they did a choreographed dance because that's just so who they are, or the late night food was really personalized to who they are. Like something has to resonate that it was their wedding. And that sometimes takes time to figure out because some couples have that in a more obvious way than others. But I remember even with, when Daniel and I were getting married, there were certain things that were just important to us because it felt true to who we were. It didn't mean that it was going to make it into a magazine because of having, X first dance or this late night food, but those were things that just felt important to us. And I'm fortunate enough to work in a community where I see the same people at a lot of events. And often the feedback that I hear is not about what the extravagant details are. It's about, the speeches that were really memorable. Like I did a wedding in April where all 4 parents did their speech by video. So they got together and they did a video. There were no speeches throughout the night. There was just this video. It was so impactful because A, it was something different, and B, it came from such a place of love. Like it was the 4 parents all sitting together, and I think that is a strong message to send. And again, it's about family and support and energy more than anything. We're in a world where everybody likes to see something different, and different is hard because when you go too different, you sometimes alienate people also. But this was it was genuine and it was loving and it was, time effective as well from a timing perspective because instead of 4 speeches, you had 1 video. So yeah, I think it was really well received. I've done it once. This was the second time I had done it. And I think the only thing to think about in that regard is that it's a logistics discussion as well, because some people want to do a video, but to bring in a video for 1 speech might not necessarily make sense from a budget perspective. The video screen was built into the venue. So it was more of it was a backwards discussion. Like we have this video screen, what are we going to do with it? And that's where the discussion came from. Whereas other times, like, a best man wants to do a slideshow, to spend the money to bring in a screen for a 1-minute slideshow doesn't always make sense. So, but yeah, speeches often get to me. Right. Because I've also, you think about it as such a professional relationship, but it becomes somewhat of an attached relationship because you're through this process of making big decisions throughout. You often get to know the family dynamics more than you would think that you would. You're often part of more emotional conversations than you imagine your wedding planner to be involved in. So sometimes the speeches, tug on the heartstrings in that sense. And I think even without knowing couples, sometimes that happens because you get a different glimpse inside of this couple where you thought you knew them on this one level, but you've only known them for a year. So hearing some of the other stories,
some of the backstories,
is quite nice too.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so a couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
Where are we seeing you in like 5-10 years?
I think in a similar place, but in an evolved role. So I think that I will still be doing weddings. I will probably be doing less weddings. Just because the nature of the way that my business has changed in the last, I'd say 5 years, because the first few years were kind of our starting point, is that we're going more quality over quantity more than ever. And I think that we'll continue to do that just in the nature of as the weddings get bigger, more hours go into each wedding, bigger teams go into each wedding, bigger setups, bigger logistics, more time, etc. So I'm trying to do more of that and focus on those clients, and really be there for them, because the more weddings we take on, I feel like I'm just getting spread really thin. The other side to that is that I think that we'll be doing more corporate and more, event design in a different capacity.
Like social corporate?
Yeah.
Kind of
yeah.
social parties?
Yeah. So this year we've taken a much larger role in kind of PR events and charitable galas and other social events. And it's been a really fun outlet to do something different. I think that there's a lot of crossover, but it's a different dynamic in terms of, the emotional side is not there, which ironically I thought would be the reason that I enjoyed it. And it's been the reason that I'm less into it than I am weddings.
So you miss the emotional
I
part
do.
of the...
I do. I find being at anything corporate, I leave feeling less fulfilled. Whereas with a wedding day, you're there for so much love and excitement, and there's such a strong excitement and, just an emotional side to it, that I think that everybody's investment in it, like, it's a different type of energy, and I feed off that so much. Whereas I think I wanted to get more into the corporate world, but what's interesting is that I find there's a lack of that, and it does definitely feel different. But I do think that that's a good side of the business from just keeping things fresh and keeping things different, because I think, I never want to get to the place where I feel that I'm not bringing my best to the table, and I think keeping things evolving and interesting will help.
Will help do that. Fact. Okay, and last one. I want you to pose a question to either our audience or future guests, whichever.
Okay.
Floats your boat. Something that you're interested in knowing. So it could be anything about events, it could be about weddings, it could be about social media, it could be about none of the above.
Okay.
It could be about what kind of socks they wear. Anything that might be interesting for you to learn.
I think going back to your question about what questions to ask, I would love to know what questions people want to ask but are too afraid to ask. Because I think that often, people want to ask things, but they don't necessarily know how, or they don't want to, like, we often get, well, would it be okay if I asked this? And I don't want people to feel that there's a barrier there. I mean, I try and be as open as possible, but I understand that, some people might have questions that they don't feel comfortable asking. So I would love to know from an anonymous perspective, what is a question that you want to ask, but you're too afraid to? I'd say more people are asking about budget and kind of discussing that stuff, which is great, because I think that's such a big part of what we do, is managing the financial side and also helping make big financial decisions. And weddings are a big financial investment, so I think it's something that should be talked about. But I'd love to know what else people are kind of wondering that they don't ask.
Fair question. I love it. And thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So nice having you to come and sit and share all your knowledge with us.
Thank you.
You're welcome back at any point.
Thank you. I'll be back.
Cheers, my dear.
Cheers.
Ding. All right, friend, that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you want to subscribe, please hit subscribe so you see next week's episode. And as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next week on the VIP Collective.